Hi, everybody. Shannon Petrovich with Therapist Talks. And I don't know how many people are wonky from the daylight savings time. And I hope everybody's not all confused and wackadoodle in different time zones. But anyway, we're live and we'll see who shows up or what happens. Either way, I will post this video, and I have some questions that have come in over the last couple of weeks. So if you're new to this channel, welcome, and please make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification. I also posted in the chat the my new website, which is nofoggydays.com. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter so that I can let you know when new things are happening. And if I can get a thumbs up from somebody who's online to let me know that I'm coming through. Oh, I just went away. That's weird. Okay. And if you want to let me know where you're from, that'd be cool too. I know people chime in from all over the world, and I think that's incredibly cool. Again, we're always about creating safe space for people who are suffering from toxic relationships and struggling with these kinds of issues. And so we want to create safe space and create a sense of never being alone. And so we are going to always make sure that that's what we're about. So, like I said, if you want to let me know where you're from, where you're chiming in from today, that'd be great. Otherwise, we will jump in. And please jump in and ask questions. A few questions have come in over the last 2 weeks, so I will jump in on those. But you guys take priority. You guys who show up live are going to take priority. So please jump into the chat box. Scotland, awesome. So jump into the chat box and let me know what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to talk about, what is on your mind today. And it can be anything that you've struggled with in a toxic relationship or a narcissistic relationship. And we talk about all kinds of relationships on here, not just partners, but adult children, parents, all kinds of things. So if you have something on your mind, let us know in the chat box and we'll jump in. One of the questions that came up over the last couple of weeks is how idealization, devaluation, and discard plays out in long-term relationship when a narcissist does not leave the partner physically but stays for years. This is a really important topic, and it covers a lot of ground. So I'll jump in on this. But again, if you have a question or topic on your mind, please jump into the chat box and ask it. So idealization is part of the love bombing that happens in the beginning of a relationship. So when someone first gets into wanting to manipulate and control you, what they do is they idealize you and, oh, you're amazing, you're the best, you're incredible. And they want to make you feel like you are the only one in the world for them, and they come in hot and heavy, and but they're usually all flash and crash. And so you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, this person really loves me. But right on the heels of that, you'll see that devaluation, and that means that they are coming in and sort of undermining you and letting you know that you really kind of stink and you're really kind of awful and you really are a lot and you're really difficult and you're really whatever. And so they're love bombing you or idealizing you and devaluing you. And the cycling of that is extremely crazy making. And it makes you feel like it's you and me against the world. It's this person that this is the only person for me. And yet I'm not very lovable because even they don't love me all the time. They come in hot and heavy and then they pull back and then they come in and then they pull back. So this cycling is what makes you feel like you're not worthy, but they love you and they're the only one that's going to love you. And then when they discard, and sometimes they'll discard and then come back in and hoover, and then discard and come back in and hoover. And again, it's kind of training you to beat up on yourself and to feel like there's something really wrong with you, that this person who loved you so intensely is telling you that you are just unworthy, unlovable, and all that. So that cycling is what creates that sense of unworthiness, unlovableness. And then if they don't leave, but they're continuing this cycle, you really start to feel terrible about yourself. And the other thing that happens is you start to beat up on yourself internally so that then their work is almost done. They don't have to do it anymore because you're doing it for them. So you're undermining and undermining and undermining yourself. Anytime they blow up or have a tantrum, you're blaming yourself. And the effect of this is to make you feel really worse and worse and worse, and to make you live on those breadcrumbs of idealization that they throw in there when you're just about getting sick and tired of them. So they will just get you to the edge of wanting to dump them, and then they come in with that idealization again, and then you feel good again, and then you get that hit of dopamine again, and then you feel like, oh, this relationship, we're back to where we were. So it's that creates the trauma bonding too, where you're always triggered by their moods, their emotions, their needs, their wants, and you get triggered and you want to then placate and people please them, but then they devalue you and discard you. So it's this back and forth that really screws you up. So that's one of the most important pieces that we have to look out for in a relationship. If you see that in an early part of a relationship, you need to cut and run. It's really, really critical that you recognize that somebody who actually really cares about you is not going to be that hot and cold, hot and cold. They're not going to come in with the heavy guns and then pull out and just completely devalue and run you down. That's just not love. So you've got to value yourself enough to not listen to that and recognize that that is just tearing you down over time, and you're worth more. You have to you have to get free. Um, so let's see, Scotland question. My husband had OCD, contamination, and psychological tortured me while I worked from home since 2019 for 2 years, kept forcing me to stay in in the in the something with him. Um, So there's so much that can happen when you are isolated with somebody. And I know that for a lot of people, going through the pandemic with somebody who was abusive was hell on earth. And one of the things that's really, really important is recognizing and taking care of yourself for that. So OCD, contamination, um, OCD is the obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's not super well understood. So somebody with OCD wouldn't necessarily be torturing you, okay, or psychologically torturing you. They would have their own issues and they would maybe be upset about that, but they're not going to take that out on you unless they also have some narcissistic tendencies, some lack of empathy, some lack of compassion. So typically these are two different things is what I'm trying to say. Somebody with OCD is not necessarily an abusive partner, okay? So what's important for you to recognize is that those two things are separate. So you can have somebody who has OCD, but unless they have a poor empathy and poor compassion, they can still be a person that you can work with on those issues. But if that's something combined with narcissistic traits and that kind of thing, that can be really, really terrible because, okay, he used to charm me and everyone, but after living together, he wouldn't let me work and distracted me by yelling at me, forcing me to spray Lysol. He doesn't see it was wrong. Um, so yeah, and that's the problem is somebody with narcissistic traits, one of the traits is that they don't see that they're at fault. They believe everybody else is at fault. And so when anything happens, when they behave badly, and there's another somebody that chimed in, said that they were raging and they put their fists through a window and were bleeding and said, "Look what you made me do." That's that's that complete lack of compassion, complete lack of ability to recognize their own behaviors. So OCD a disorder. These are behaviors. And what I mean by that is that they're choices. When you see somebody being able to turn it off when somebody is there that they don't want to see them behaving badly, and then they flip it back on when you're alone, that's a behavior, right? You know, when your 5-year-old turns on a tantrum because they know they can get away with it and they can get you to give them that ice cream because they know you, then you know that that's a behavior, but we don't recognize that these are grown-up tantrums, basically, and those tantrums are just as intentional and just as in control as a child's tantrum. And if you don't think a child's tantrum's in control, watch what happens when they're with a person that they know they can't manipulate, and that you'll see that that's they know that they can manipulate this person in their lives, and they know they can't manipulate that person. They'll turn on the tantrum for this person, then they won't turn it on for that. So you have to recognize these grown-up tantrums are the same thing. So they can turn it on, they can turn it off, they can turn it back on again. When you see that behavior, you have to know that they're making choices. And the critical part of that is that when you set boundaries, then you give and you stop placating and stop people pleasing and stop peacekeeping, then you can see if that person can change. Because a lot of times we are not being honest and truthful and direct and boundaried in our relationships, especially early on. And if you are not, and you're busy placating and people pleasing, then you're not giving that relationship any opportunity to see if it can grow, to see if that person has any ability to change. And if they don't, then you know, end of story. You got to get out. I don't want to let too much time go by. Hi from New York City. Is it common for narcissists to turn the tables and accuse you of stalking and harassment when they're actually the ones doing that? Does it make them feel important to falsely accuse this way? So this is a classic, and this is projection. I did a video probably a year or so ago now called Projection: The Way Narcissists Tell on Themselves. So when a narcissist says to you, "You are so judgmental," when they're the most judgmental person on the planet, or "You are so mean," and they're really mean and you're being totally kind and compassionate, or when they say, "You're stalking and harassing me," what they're doing is a projection. And what that is it's actually one of the more primitive defense mechanisms. And so when we as therapists look at defense mechanism, we look at them sort of in a continuum. And very primitive means that they're very, very immature. So a very, very immature defense mechanism is to project all your junk out at somebody else. And this is what that is. And so I don't think it's as intentional as making them feel important to falsely accuse. I think it's this. I think a lot of narcissists are in that delusional state of mind where they don't think that they're to blame. They don't think they're responsible for any of their behavior. And so they'll accuse you of what they're doing because it keeps them from having to actually look in the mirror and take a look at themselves. Does that make sense? Okay. So horrible. My dad is a sneaky parasite. He is undermining all of my relationships. It's almost like stalking. So, this is so tragic. When a parent is narcissistic, that's really tough because we all know as parents, any of us who are parents, that that is a very altruistic thing. We have to be very empathic, very compassionate, very much all about that other person as we're helping them grow into adults and live their lives. When a parent is narcissistic or has narcissistic traits, what that means is that they, by definition, don't have empathy, don't have compassion, don't care about others. And how do you, how are you a kid in that environment when the only time that you are lovable or loved is when you are either adoring them, so you're pumping up their hot air balloon. So I think of narcissists as a hot air balloon. So they're empty inside, and you have to constantly adore and puff them up in order for them to sort of have that hot air balloon, um, or it'll implode and then it'll explode. So it's extremely important that you recognize that as a child of a narcissist, You were only adored or only loved when you were adoring them, puffing them up, or when you were adorable. And so when you had your own sense of self and when you mattered and when you were just being a kid, then you were not lovable. So this sets up a very awful sense of self and a really messed up sense of self. And I did have a question in here this past 2 weeks about that too. Was that what are the how do you deal with that if you have been raised by somebody? Because it's really, really hard to have a good solid sense of self when you only mattered when you were not having a good sense of self. Does that make sense? So when you actually have your own voice, have your own sense of self, have your own things that you think or feel or want or need, you don't matter and you are not lovable. And so it's just really debilitating. And so you have to start from the very ground up. Who am I? What matters to me? What are my character qualities? What are my values? And when you can decide all those things, and I talk about that a lot in my book, and I know some of you already have this. In the first piece of my book, I talk about how that narcissist has damaged that internal sense of self, so that we have to find our character qualities and our values, and we have to build that sense of self so that we have a solid sense before we can then set boundaries and then have a good ability to handle life on life's terms, as well as having good boundaries in the world and a good creepometer that will warn us off of other narcissists. So let me jump into the next piece. The ex narcissist reinforced childhood wounds of being unlovable. However, I determined he was insane and dumped him. He's currently relentlessly hoovering me. Yeah, so a lot of people will not, even if they did the dumping, whether you dumped him or he dumped you or she or he, um, oftentimes that hoovering is because they do not want to let go. They do not want to lose control and they do not want to lose that supply of puffing up, as I talked about before. So it's extremely important that you do separate physically and keep cutting that off, because that hoovering, if they do get you sucked back in, then you're just getting depleted again. It's like a parasite, and we know that the parasite is going to deplete the source, right? And so it's really important that you get clean and clear as much as you can. I think they turn everything against you. It's like they shake you out of your skin and climb in. Yeah, and so that parasitic thing or that vampire thing or that black hole in the universe, I've done videos on kind of called all of those things, because it does feel like your very energy, your soul, your thoughts, your feelings are just getting sucked out of you, depleted. And it is because they don't care about your thoughts, feelings, wants, needs, anything. And you start to, because they're throwing little tantrums anytime you're not puffing them up enough, and so then you start to care only about their thoughts, feelings, needs, moods, emotions. And then you start to not matter to yourself. And then I've worked with a lot of people who will get out of a relationship like this, and they literally don't know what they think, feel, need, want, and they have to regroup from the inside out. It's really hard. You feel empty, and then you're highly at risk for going back or getting sucked back in or getting bullied back into that relationship, because you feel so empty internally. So it's really important that rather than getting sucked back into that relationship to fill you up, that you fill yourself from the inside out, that you rebuild your sense of self, rebuild your connections, because you probably lost track of most of your people as they isolate you, as they carve you out from your people. And then, in addition, you've got to rebuild your whole life. You may have lost a lot of your activities, a lot of what mattered to you. All of those things really are extremely important to fill back up. Sleep deprived. Oh, yeah. He wanted me to stay up till he was So, sleep deprivation is one of the ways that people control and manipulate. If you think about people getting even a prisoner of war, the way that they tear you down emotionally is by sleep deprivation. And so it will tear you down emotionally, physically. Sleep deprivation actually has a hugely detrimental effect on our physical well-being, on our immune system, on everything. So it's extremely important that you recognize all the thousand different ways they're manipulating and controlling you. And if it's making you deprived sleep wise or food wise or just time to yourself or time with your loved ones, all of those ways that they deprive you makes you feast only on them, makes you feed only on the breadcrumbs that they give you, and that makes you a hostage. So, I did a video years ago about, um, being in relationship with a narcissist is not it's more like being a hostage because they are controlling you, manipulating you, and using you for their needs, their wants, their emotions, their placating, all of it, and you don't matter. And so it's very much like being held hostage. And this is why it's so critical to get clear, understand what's going on, see all of it for what it is. It's like a smorgasbord of manipulation strategies, if you will. So they've got all these different things. They can turn on the tears. Oh, that didn't work. So turn on the anger. Huh, that didn't work either. So now I'll turn on the guilt trip. Oh, that's working. Cool. So I'll keep hitting that guilt trip button. Cool. Now I'm going to turn on the charm. Now that's working for right now, but now I'm getting sick of doing that because that's too much work. So now I'll turn on the guilt trip again. Then I'll turn on the anger. Then I'll turn on the tears. It's crazy making, so you have to see it as a smorgasbord of manipulation strategies that all are the same thing. They're all control and manipulation, and you have to see them all as what they are. Struggling with several different presentations of narcissism. The parent, the former friends, but the one that's proving to be the most harmful is my child. So hard to deal with and be a parent and heal. It is so hard. And, my, the, the video that's getting the most views lately over the last few months has been the one about when your son or daughter is a narcissist. And it's really tough. I did an updated one too. So make sure you check that one out. It's not as out there. And it was only about the last month that I did that one. So check that one out too. But it's really important that, again, you look at all these different strategies because it's the same thing. A lot of narcissistic adult children watched one of their parents be a bully, be manipulative and narcissistic in that parenting relationship. So they have all these strategies in their playbook. And so they'll turn on the tears and then they'll turn on the guilt trip and then they'll turn on the rage and then they'll turn the tears back on, then a little bit of suicidal threat. And all of these things, again, are the same manipulation strategies. So you have to see them the same and step back emotionally from them and learn to recognize this is not about me. Yes, they're telling me I'm a terrible parent, but that's still not about you. So it's behavior that's made to manipulate you and control you. You have to stay separate emotionally, clean and clear, boundaried, and then, be in relationship with that person if you have to, or if you need to or want to, but do it with boundaries. Don't do it by placating, peacekeeping, and people pleasing, because that's just undermining yourself, and you will continue to not exist fully in that relationship. And we can't live that way. We just can't. It's so depleting. So you have to get to a place of being fully honest and having good boundaries. And you can do it with your kid, even so. It's not easy, but it is doable. Is there any link between narcissism and sexual dysfunction? When I tried to discuss issue calmly, the narc blamed me for all of the severe sexual issues rather than acknowledging the problem. I think this is probably something that you would have to take to a therapist. I think that, again, there can be um, sexual dysfunction can be one of the strategies of manipulation and control, either demanding sex or withholding sex or anything else. All of those things can be, I mean, sex can be used as manipulation and control, obviously, in our society. It's rampant and horrific and not something that anybody should have to cope with on a daily basis. That is one of the worst types of manipulation, control, and abuse that there is. And so if that's happening in a relationship, again, not having knowledge of what else is going on, but I would say that it's highly possible that this is also being used as a manipulation or control. Do flying monkeys tend to be just as bad as the narc? That's what it seems to me. Are they usually narcissistic and disordered people themselves? You know, I've known a lot of flying monkeys who were just absolutely controlled and manipulated by the narcissist, and sadly just weren't onto the games. And so they were really nice people and really kind, caring people and wouldn't see themselves doing mean things, but they think that they're defending this person who's the narcissist, who's actually not the victim, but they think that they are the victim. And so they are, yeah. So I've seen it both ways. I've seen flying monkeys who were just as narcissistic, and it's sort of like the mean girls gang. They can be male or female, but typically a lot of times these are kind of that mean girls gang, who's just all about themselves and very superficial and mean to other people out of sport, which is a narcissistic trait. A kind, caring, compassionate, empathic person would never be mean to somebody out of sport. But I also have, like I said, seen flying monkeys who were just deluded, and they really just were controlled and manipulated by the narcissist and really didn't understand the reality of what was going on and thought that the narcissist was the victim and the other people were victimizers, and that was backwards. So it's really hard to decipher all this stuff. And somebody who's a really good covert narcissist can manipulate and control other people really well, sell them a story that just sounds um, plausible, I guess, and not recognize the lies that just are pouring out of this person nonstop. And when those lies are pouring out over and over and over again, but they don't see it, they're just deluded and not necessarily bad people. So peer pressure and social shame. Yes, there's more. I left with 4 kids because he tried to turn the cops on me, but the cops saw that he was mentally out of it, constant threats of divorce and lawsuits, and he's still sick at his mom's. Yeah, so, and I've seen people get arrested because the narcissist was able to flip the script and play the victim, and that person, ended up getting arrested. So they literally can manipulate and control anybody if they're really good at it, and it's an awful thing. So again, this kind of speaks to really needing to be super careful in the very beginnings of a relationship. So when you're in an early relationship, it would be so important to emotionally step back, emotionally keep a little bit of distance, physically keep distance, as you all know if you've listened to me for any amount of time. There, I did a video called "How to Develop um, a Trustworthy Creepometer," and the one thing that will disable it every time. And so when you meet somebody, recognize how they act, how they talk about people, how they treat others, how they react to others, how they react to when they get their feelings hurt or when they get upset about something or when they are disappointed or they don't get their way. All of these things are are ripe for the picking. This is the information that you need in an early relationship. And when you jump into intimacy too fast, your higher functioning, your rational mind go offline, and you are at the whim and will of your emotional mind, which is already attached and hooked in. So it's super important to keep a little bit of distance, take breaks, take a step back, and see what happens, because somebody who's coming in hot and heavy and coming in with the love bombing and the idealization, all that stuff, if you ask them to take a beat and take a pause, they're going to get pissy with you, because they're all about control and manipulation. And if you don't let them control and manipulate you, they're going to get pissy. And and then unfortunately, that I want to be with somebody part of us might go, "Oh gosh, I better jump in and placate and jump in and try to rescue this relationship." And that's kind of our impulse, but you want to calm down that impulse and just watch and recognize if somebody gets pissy with you because you asked for a little bit of space and time, and you told them what you want or need or feel or think. You dodged a bullet. Like, don't get involved with somebody that's going to get pissy with you because you asked to fully exist in a relationship. I mean, this is the essence of what a healthy relationship is. If you are able to have your thoughts, feelings, needs, wants honored and known and respected, and it isn't all about that person's thoughts, needs, wants, moods, everything else. So it's got to be give and take. It's got to be both people matter. It's got to be everybody's thoughts, feelings, wants, needs matter. And if it isn't that, then you dodged a bullet. So always take your time and never jump in too fast. That is just toxic soup. He would say he loves me, but wouldn't want to because of trauma. He was little. Boy, again, I don't know about that. It certainly can be, but I wouldn't hazard a guess, yes or no. In the real world, no means no. In a professional way, he would stretch everything to lie and charm and talk endlessly, so clearly and elated. All your videos and these online talks you provide are wonderful. They're invaluable and so helpful. Very grateful. Thank you so much. You're so welcome, and I really am glad that they are helpful. Where is everybody from today? Where are people coming from? And if anybody wants to chime in again, I am all about it. But if not, I will jump into a couple that have come in. A 25-year estrangement because I set a boundary. So a lot of people have been talking about their adult kids and setting boundaries, and then having the reaction be disconnect. And that happens sometimes, and we have to recognize that we can sort of try to work with that a little bit by saying, when you rage at me, I'm going to hang up, or I'm going to, leave the house. And if you calm down and want to talk about it later, I'm all about it. And then set that boundary and then do what you need to do, because you can't take that incoming assault. It isn't healthy. It's actually like drinking poison, because every time you go through something like that, it's like a shot of adrenaline that goes through your entire body. If you've ever had that happen, I'm sure nobody nobody on this channel would be here if they hadn't had that happen. When somebody blew up, scared you to death, and you had that rush of adrenaline, afterwards you feel like this depression, right? Yeah. So that is the adrenaline surging through your body and then depleting. And so that surge and depletion and surge and depletion and surge and depletion is exhausting. It actually causes anxiety, depression. It drops your serotonin levels. It's decimating your system. And especially if it goes on all the time. And if you're afraid of it all the time, even if it's not happening all the time, it happens intermittently. But then they throw out this little mini tantrum just to get that adrenaline going, and then you go, oh my god, so you placate and make sure that you calm them down. that is toxic soup. You are drinking poison all day, every day, and that is so bad for you. So it's extremely important that you walk away, hang up the phone, leave the house, do whatever you have to do to refuse to engage in that verbal assault. Now, obviously, if it's a physical assault, you've got to get all the way away. But we're talking verbal assault. So when that happens, you've got to get away from it. But, if it is your adult child and if it, or a person that matters to you and you're trying to make it something work on some level, emotionally step back, allow yourself to have those boundaries and honor them. And it'll be scary. You'll want to call them or text them or I'm sorry, or I don't really mean it. I didn't mean to abandon you or any of that stuff. Don't do the people pleasing, placating stuff. Just sit tight. And then if they have the ability to change their behavior, they will. They will apologize, or maybe they will just brush it under the rug, but they will recognize that you're giving them these grown up timeouts and they don't like that. And so they're not going to rage at you. If they keep raging at you, then you have to take care of yourself and you have to stay away. Sad, but that is the truth of it. I've recently discovered the intricacies of narcs and everything that goes with it. I'm having a problem with getting out of the black hole that this trauma has put me through. And this is really hard. And that's why I wrote this book, because I can only do so much with these online things and yet so many people don't have access to therapy. And I get that. So this is designed to have so I give you a piece of information, perspective, and then some journal prompts. So I help you work it through, because you have to work through the first pieces and then the next pieces, and then you have to rebuild from the inside out, because people can be years away from the relationship and still feel empty and still kind of almost get pulled back in, because there's such a profound emptiness. Because, as we've been talking about, you've been completely focused on taking care of their needs, their wants, their thoughts, their feelings, their little tantrums. You've been so busy placating them, you literally have emptied out of your whole self. So, filling that in is how we get well. And it takes some work, and it takes some recognition of what's going on and how to make it work. So that black hole is real. That's what I want you to hear. The black hole is real. The depletion is real. That bankruptcy that you feel is real, and you can heal from it. So if you have access to a therapist, please do that. But if you don't, see if this doesn't help you. And I'm not trying to sell books. I kept it as cheap as possible. I promise. I just really want to help people that don't have access. So, do you have any tips on identity disturbances caused by borderline personality? My sister has borderline and always mirrors us and is getting kind of annoying. Oof, that's hard. Borderline personality is another similar, it has some similar traits to narcissistic personality, but I think of it as a little bit differently. So, whereas the narcissist needs to be puffed up because he or she has that feeling or need to be in that superficial, the borderline also is sort of empty and doesn't have a solid sense of self, but their primary drive, where the narcissist's primary drive is control and manipulation, the borderline's primary drive is not to be abandoned. And so their abandonment intensity is off the charts. So if they feel like they might get abandoned, their behavior goes way wild. And so when you are with that person, it can be just as traumatic as being with a narcissist. Again, you have to have boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. So if the rage happens, or if all of that drama happens, all of this manipulation and control around not wanting to be abandoned, you have to set boundaries, 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 and then take care of yourself. Because it's sort of like, I think of it like the Star Trek shields. If you remember that, they'd put up their shields, and then pretty soon after the Klingons have been firing at them too much, then Scotty would say, "We can't hold her anymore, Scotty," or Captain. And so then they would have to retreat. and go recharge their batteries with whatever they do that with, and just time and the sun or something. I don't know. And then they were ready for battle again. And that's how we are. Like you can deplete your energy core if you're getting too much of this coming at you. So you've got to take care of yourself, and and it's really important to recognize that those borderline personality disorder behaviors can be just as toxic as those narcissistic ones. They just sometimes don't feel as awful because it's sort of, I don't know, it can be not as mean-spirited, but their behaviors can be just as radically disturbing. Oftentimes, they'll go into, that implosion in terms of suicidal ideation, suicidal threats, tears, like, really severe stuff, and sometimes you do really have to take care of yourself by setting boundaries. I did a couple of videos on that too. You may wanna look those up. How do I help kids feel super safe and detox the trauma and form good emotional regulation after leaving a narc spouse? Please, where do I start? Time, space, hugs. So, um, y- different kids are going to respond to this stuff differently. And here's the weird thing. Some kids may be super empathic, compassionate, almost on the placating, peacekeeping, people-pleasing side, and you have to teach those kids to take care of themselves and teach those kids to express themselves and speak up for themselves and have boundaries and not, it's very adorable when a kid is people-pleasing and placating, but it's not healthy. They need to have their own sense of self, and you also have to recognize the kid that seems to be modeling that narcissistic behavior, and you need to set boundaries with that kid early and consistently because that kid is going to grow up to be like your ex. And that's not a good thing because they'll treat you the same way your ex did. And that's a horrible thing to have to realize at this point, but it's true. If you can, again, if you can get therapy for them, please do. If not, you doing your work to fill up yourself in the right ways is going to be critical. And then you will also learn how to help them. There's also, I love DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And Marsha Linehan is sort of the queen bee of DBT. And I think it teaches lots of great skills for parents to teach kids. So we want our kids to be emotionally intelligent, and that emotional intelligence and DBT skills go hand in hand. So Marsha Linehan, DBT, it's good for you and it's good for your kids. Um, Covert aggressive neglect. Wow, that's a mouthful. It's like passive rebellion, stonewalling, divorced. So passive rebellion, stonewalling, and again, it's like this big smorgasbord of manipulation and control strategies. And there are so many, it's hard to even quantify. I did a recent video called The Martyr Narcissist because in my client work, I've been hearing a lot of these coming up, and they were actually parents, narcissistic parents who would do the martyr narcissist thing. And so it's this sort of I'm so put upon and I'm so victimized by all of you, and but they wouldn't. I don't know. It's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it, but that martyr. So that passive rebellion is another thing. Stonewalling is just that uh, covert aggressive. That's passive aggressive, right? And so it's just more stuff. And when you have a sense of everything that they're doing is a game, and when everything that they're doing is just like a smorgasbord of manipulation and control strategies, then you can emotionally step back and watch the circus go by. You can recognize, oh, they're playing that game again. Oh, and I didn't react to that. See, here's the trick. You don't want to react to that because every time you jump in the monkey's cage with them, then it riles them all up again, right? So you don't want to jump in and engage with them on any of these games. You just want to watch. So if you see that guilt trip, And then you see them playing the martyr, and then playing the victim, and then playing the aggressor, and then playing the victim again. And this is so interesting. Like even someone who's being outwardly aggressive, and then said, "You just do," and then, oh, I froze up. Um, oh, I froze up again. When somebody is the aggressor, and then they're saying, "You just pick on me all the time." That's so crazy making, I mean, when somebody's actually being aggressive and threatening you and then telling you that you're picking on them. That's kind of where we started with that flipping the tables, flipping the script, acting the victim when they're actually the aggressor. Again, these are all the games. And if you're a really empathic, compassionate person, isn't the worst thing someone can say to you is that you're being mean? It's like, "Oh my gosh, no, I'm never mean." And so if somebody says that, or if they tell you you're judgmental, or they tell you you're awful, or you're uh, scapegoating them or whatever, that's just really hard to take. And so that's what they're going to use. If it works, they're going to use it. If that button sets you off, then they're going to keep pushing that button, so that your job is to be the journalist. If you just take notes, you just step back and sit back and watch. I did one called The Journalist, and it's really about just stepping back. You know how a journalist will be in a war zone and there's bombs going off all around them, and they're just taking notes and just flat faced, and that's kind of how you have to be if you're going to be around them at all. Journaling and meditation is what I do. I'm glad I did the right thing, even though this isn't my first divorce. It's best for kids to see boundaries. Absolutely. Kids have to see boundaries. What hurts the most is the sister likes to use me as the favorite person, a family for a girlfriend already, and sister uses me as a favorite person, uses me as a sense of happiness for her. Can you hear me now? I know I froze for a minute. Am I back on? No sound? Oh, that's weird. Oh, you can hear fine. Okay. I don't know why. Yeah, and I have super beefed up internet here, and for some reason I noticed it froze a couple of times. Anyway, as we start to wind down, it's not on my end. Okay, cool. Thank you, Suzanne. As we start to wind down, any other questions, anything that would be helpful as we start to kind of wrap this one up? And anybody wants to chime in where you are from. I always love hearing where people are from. It's exciting to me. I know uh, a, a listener from Serbia is here, and I know Scotland chimed in earlier. And I know some of you can't say where you're from because you're still Washington, D.C. Thanks. Um, but any other questions as we start to wind down? Um, let's see. Family events. You know what? I live in Singapore. Wow. Thank you for chiming in from Singapore. I can't even imagine what time it is there. um, so, we're coming into the holidays, and family events can be really, really hard. And so I want to really encourage people to be all about being that journalist. And if you want to jump into that, it's called the journalist method of dealing with a narcissist, or something along those lines. I think if you search it on my channel, you'll find it. But it's really about being able to be present with people, but not engaged in their drama. And so, when you come to the holidays, and as we come into the holidays, it's really important that you recognize you can be a part of something, but not engaged emotionally. That you can watch people go at it and you go, wow, they've always done that. You can watch people try to hook people and try to engage people in an argument, politics. Oh, God, don't go there. And you can keep yourself emotionally distant, emotionally detached. It's really practice it, try it and keep yourself kind of watching the circus go by and not engaging. And you'll find that you enjoy being around people more and that you don't get hooked as much and that you have more strength when it comes to being around other people who are even more engaging and more hooking of you because the hooking is, it's like somebody's fishing and they will go at you with all these different games that we've talked about and they will throw that cast out. And if you grab onto that hook, then you're going to get reeled in. But if you watch that go by and you just go, oh, there's another hook, there's another hook, there's another hook, but don't hook onto it, don't grab onto it, don't grab that worm, then you can survive all of it, and you don't need to engage in any of it. It's so critical. And remember that, as we talked about today, that when you get that hit of adrenaline, every time you get that hit of adrenaline, it's like drinking poison to your body. I mean, we were created to be able to react with that fight, flight, or freeze, but we weren't created to have that happen to us all day, every day. So if you're in a toxic or abusive relationship and that's happening to you all day, every day, you are drinking poison and it destroys your immune system, it destroys your mood, it creates anxiety, depression, all kinds of ills. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that, that we're doing self-calming strategies, prayer and meditation and being out in nature and taking care of ourselves and getting exercise and all that stuff that replenishes our bodies and calms down our brain chemistry and helps us feel better. All right, so we've come to the end of our time today, and I thank everybody for being so active on the chat. I'm so excited about that. I come with stuff to talk about, but if you guys have it and you bring it, then you guys have the priority. I will post this. Make sure that you jump in on my website, please. It's kind of fresh. So it's called nofoggydays.com, but you can also get there with therapisttalks.com. There's a newsletter. Please sign up so that I can send out little blasts when new things come up. Also, some articles and some podcasts that I've been doing, all that kind of stuff. So thank you all, and take really good care of yourselves, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.